A dramatic new discovery gives a glimpse at an ancient tragedy. Officials at Pompeii have uncovered the skeleton of a man crushed by an enormous rock while he was trying to escape the explosion of Mount Vesuvius 2,000 years ago. They say the guy was trying to run from the eruption, which is believed to have killed around 30,000 people. Officials say they can even tell he had a leg injury that apparently slowed down his attempted escape.
That's incredible. Look at that. Look at those pictures. Wow. All right, that was fun. Thank you for joining us.
Outnumbered starts right now.
Fox News alert, President Trump confirming the vice chairman of North Korea is heading to New York for talks. When he lands tomorrow in New York City, he'll be the highest-ranking North Korean official to visit the country since 2000. As the president suggests, there is a lot of new hope that a summit will take place. This is Outnumbered. I'm Sandra Smith, here today. Harris Faulkner, Town Hall editor and Fox News contributor Katie Pavlich, Democratic strategist and Fox News contributor Jessica Tarlov, and joining us on the couch, Fox Business anchor David Asman, and he is outnumbered.
I am. I'm so happy to be back. Thank you all.
Happy to be back. You look so happy in your close-up.
How can you not be
super
happy?
Your daughter just got married. We were just looking at the pictures.
Thank you. We were showing nice pictures of them. Yeah, a week ago.
On the program? Oh,
no, just that.
Just a beautiful bride.
That can be our first topic.
All right, a lot of news to get to. Let's begin. A lot of new developments as President Trump is still working towards potentially meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. White House counselor Kellyanne Conway weighing in this morning.
This president on the brink again of bringing conversation and coordination between North Korea and South Korea. For the first time in 18 years, a North Korean official will be coming to America on the way to New York.
President Trump tweeting earlier, we have put a great team together for our talks with North Korea. Meetings are currently taking place concerning summit and more. Kim Young-chul, the vice chairman of North Korea, heading now to New York. Solid response to my letter. Thank you. Vice Chairman Kim Young-chul, who used to be the head of North Korea's spy agency, landed in Beijing today ahead of his trip to the United States. This follows a phone call between President Trump and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe yesterday. The two agreed to meet in advance of the expected meeting between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. We're now learning they will meet June 7th. On Saturday, Kim Jong-un met with the president of South Korea. Kim reiterated his commitment to participating in a summit with the U.S. And the Trump administration reportedly going to hold off on applying major new sanctions against North Korea. Rich Edson is following all of this for us live from the State Department. Rich, where things continue to change, where are we now?
Good afternoon, Sandra. And that top North Korean official on his way to New York right now. This would be the highest level official visit from a North Korean official since 2000 to the United States. The White House says North Korean Vice Chairman of the Central Committee, Kim Young-chul, will meet later this week with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. An Associated Press photographer captured Kim connecting through Beijing on his way to the United States. Kim has been deeply involved in North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un's international outreach to China, South Korea for the Olympics, and to the United States. Kim Young-chul has already met with Secretary Pompeo, the CIA Director and Secretary of State. Pompeo has already traveled to Pyongyang twice. As a senior military official, Kim is also under U.S. sanctions for his suspected involvement in North Korea's nuclear program, the deadly attack on a South Korean ship in 2010, and several other provocations. The administration says the U.S. negotiating team is still in a demilitarized zone between North and South Korea. They're continuing preparations for this summit between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. The White House says other administration officials are in Singapore. They're coordinating the logistics of this expected summit. Officials say they are still on target for June 12th, or trying to target June 12th, even after the president threatened last week to scrap this. So the U.S. and North Korea are working on the logistics, like where specifically to have this, travel arrangements. But then there's also the substance of negotiating the discussions about how North Korea is going to surrender its nuclear program, how much of that it's going to surrender, what that looks like, and what the United States is willing to give in return. So this is a very aggressive schedule to try to get this summit back on track for June 12th in Singapore. But there's also this issue of laying the groundwork for the talks between Kim Jong-un and President Trump so that they can reach a deal on this issue. Sandra?
A lot we know, a lot we don't at this point. Rich Edson
right.
at the State Department, thank you. So, David, this leaves us with the big question. What are the chances this actually happens? And if it happens, is it June 12th? Is it after that date?
Well, you said there are a lot of things we don't know. One thing we do know is that this guy who's coming here, Kim Jong-chul, I think is his name. I mean, he is a danger. These are, it sort of reminds me of a friend who used to have a collection of poisonous spiders, you know, and I always wondered how the heck can he deal with poisonous spiders? He became the curator of the reptile department at the National Zoo, so he knew what he was doing, but I just hope, and I think they do, when you look at our current Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, you think of John Bolton, you think of Ms. Haspel, the head of the CIA. They know that they're dealing with poisonous spiders. They have all the background of how to deal with these people. So I trust that they will be as careful as you have to be. But this is a guy who was responsible for the death of 46 South Koreans involved in that naval incident that Rich was talking about. God knows how many North Koreans he's been responsible for murdering. So we're dealing with poisonous spiders, and we just have to be very careful here.
What does this mean politically if this does happen, Jessica? What are Democrats going to have to say about this? Would they give the president a victory if this summit actually takes place?
I think so, absolutely. I think there has been cautious optimism on both sides here. I think that what seemed like a rather brash letter that went out canceling the summit from President Trump was something that ruffled feathers on both sides. I saw that from Republicans who'd been supportive of him also.
Well, it looks like it was effective from
It's not about that, but I think that there has always been a discomfort amongst a lot of people with the way in which President Trump does diplomacy. And
I want them to be uncomfortable, though. I want the North Koreans to be uncomfortable.
Fine. I'm just saying when you see that and when it shows up suddenly out of nowhere and you think there's a summit coming and it's a very, Trumpian written letter, as it were, not at all in diplomatic speak, I understand why people on both sides are a bit like,
Can I ask you a question about that, though? Because you and other Democrats are describing the letter quite differently. You call it a brash letter. I think you understand the diplomacy that the president was trying to acknowledge there. Nancy Pelosi called it a Valentine. It can't be both. Right?
Well,
I'm
not
can't
Nancy.
Yeah, I know you're not Nancy, but it's interesting. You're also not, you're not on the Hill, so you're able to step back and kind of look at things and maybe call them what they are. I don't know if she was playing a game of politics there, but she looks pretty silly today now, coming out calling something a giggle fit for an enemy who did what David just described and much more, and there are pictures to go with some of that stuff.
And then there's the whole threatening us with nuclear war thing again that took place. So I think they did deserve a quote brash letter in response to that.
But it brought them to the table.
Well, and it brought them back to diplomacy, right? So there was all of this talk leading up to the summit. The president agreed to this months ago. He never said it was a done deal. The White House never said it was a done deal. They put a date on the calendar, and then Kim Jong-un started meeting with China behind our back, started acting up, and then the thing fell apart because of the North Koreans, and the president, rightfully so, pulled out after, again, they threatened us with nuclear war. If you look at what's happening now, moving forward, John Bolton, who has been in a little bit of controversy for talking about the Libyan model over the last couple of weeks, has been in direct contact with South Korean officials recently. He talks to them almost every single day. You have the prime minister,
South Korean and the Japanese.
Correct. My next point is the prime minister of Japan is coming to the White House at the first week of June, June 6th, to meet directly with President Trump. So they are still engaged. They never said the summit was a done deal. They understood from the beginning they could pull out of it. June 12th is pretty soon. I'm not so sure that they'll get to it then. But this idea that the White House never had the card to pull off the table of not showing up, that was always on the table.
By the way, don't you get the sense that the Japanese prime minister is more aligned with President Trump on dealing with North Korea than the South Korean President Moon? In fact, President Moon didn't know that the meeting was going to be canceled. Of course, it may be back on again until he got back to South Korea. He was visiting here. He seemed to be in shock by the whole thing. It just seems that he is a little too anxious to give everything the North Koreans want in this deal.
What did you make of the U.S. confirming and making it very public they would not impose any new sanctions on North Korea in the meantime?
Right. Well, I love the good cop, bad cop that President Trump has made, because it is working like no other policy has worked going back with Republican and Democratic administrations in the past. They've always gotten away with their crap when it comes to building up their nuclear arsenal, building up their missile technology. They've gotten away with it by glad talking in some cases, by talking with terrible language in the past.
Well, only
that was never hit back properly by a president until now. Now we have this mix. It may not please the diplomats, Jessica, but it gets the point through to the folks in North Korea who, as I said before, are poisonous. These are the nastiest characters on earth, and this is the way that you get through to them.
And this keeps the North Koreans kind of on their heels in terms of what would they normally be doing, Katie? They'd be firing missiles to show that they're in charge. By this president saying, you know what, we're now gonna lean in with more diplomacy. We'll hold back on the sanctions, which, by the way, we know really hurt your people. Remember what he called the North Korean people last week? He spoke directly to them at one point. He said they are hardworking people. He's kind of encircling Kim Jong-un, and you know he's in the middle. He's got the hardliners who were telling him to say the stuff he said last week about death to, the nuclear war, whatever. And then he's got his people on the ground kind of glimpsing sunshine for once.
Yeah, of course, we haven't talked about China, though, which is a key issue here, because the president last week said after the last meeting that Kim had with the Chinese, they went silent. They stopped talking.
Well, he said North Korea started acting differently.
That's correct. Right. Then we had some kind of deal that was made with a telephone company at the end of last week, and then it's back on again, ZTE. So what is the relationship between our trade relations with China and their pressure on North Korea either to have a deal or to pull back from a deal? It's a real three-dimensional chess game that we're playing here.
Well, the China trade conversation is a lot more complicated, especially once you find out that the Trump organization is getting a whole lot of patents over there in China at the same time that this is going on for Ivanka's company specifically. And there are a lot of people What? Well, the trade questions, the deals that President Trump is making on behalf of the United States of America are benefiting his own family.
Katie, I'll let Katie follow up on that one.
Well, I wanted to actually just go back to why the White House decided to pull the summit. If you look at the background reporting and the things that they said, there were two specific promises that the North Koreans broke when it came to why they decided to leave. They had agreed that the United States would not be stopping military exercises in South Korea. Then they got all up in arms about that continuing. And they also promised to denuclearize. Now they're saying that they're not going to. So it's not like the White House just canceled it. They put forward very specific reasons why they were pulling out.
But they did go silent. There was a period where there was this active negotiation between North Koreans and the United States, and then it just went quiet. That was right after the second meeting in China.
So I just want to know, fly on the wall, what China promised them. Maybe we'll never know.
We have to leave it there. President Trump and his lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, ramping up criticism of the special counsel's Russia probe. What they are saying now and whether they have a point. Plus, President Trump gearing up to hold a rally in Nashville tonight where GOP Senate candidate Marsha Blackburn has been touting her support of the president's agenda. Will this be a winning strategy for Republicans come November, or could it backfire with women voters who may feel differently? We'll debate.
Women are focused primarily on a couple of things. And number one is the economic security issue. And they know that their lives are getting better every single day.
Attorney Rudy Giuliani ramping up criticism of the special counsel's Russia investigation. The president tweeted just today, "Why aren't the 13 angry and heavily conflicted Democrats investigating the totally crooked campaign of totally crooked Hillary Clinton?" Two crookeds. It's a rigged witch hunt. That's why. Ask them if they enjoyed her after election celebration. Giuliani said this on Sunday.
We're more convinced as we see it that this is a rigged investigation. Now we have this whole new Spygate thing thrown on top of it, on top of already very legitimate questions.
All right. So, David, two crookeds in that.
Yeah.
Right. In that tweet from the president, you hear from his attorney. The Russia
he likes to get his point across. You got to give him that. He likes to get his point across.
The point. Talk to me about the point. And
well, the point. One of the narratives being thrown out now by the media, and of course the Democrats very often pick up what's spun first in the media, is that Spygate is a phony thing that was invented by the president. In fact, the New York Times had a big piece today saying it's a conspiracy theory. It follows in a series of conspiracy theories that the president, going way back to the birther theory that the president was touting years ago.
So what's a conspiracy? Because there actually was an FBI informant talking with the campaign.
And the point is, the New York Times itself was one of the sources for that story, and now they're trying to discredit. Now they're trying to discredit their own story because whether you call it, yes, they are. Whether you call it a spy or an informant, the same kind of procedure was used to collect information from the Trump campaign.
Spying on the Trump campaign and investigating Russian interference are different. Marco Rubio, who is not a Democrat and is not a member of the media,
it's a twofer if you're with the Obama administration.
That Spygate was a conspiracy theory.
No, but Jessica,
and Rudy Giuliani admitted that it was a PR
That's
stunt.
not true, Jessica.
The
it was the same.
Wants to discredit Mueller.
If in fact another Democrat, the Democratic Party was able to not only investigate Russia but also get some information about what the Trump campaign. You don't think that anybody in the Hillary campaign? You don't think that anybody in the Hillary campaign was interested in what was going on inside the Trump campaign?
Was the Hillary campaign in charge of the FBI?
The Hillary campaign was involved with a lot of institutions and a lot of sources that were working with the FBI and people working
politically.
Fusion GPS. Fusion GPS.
Further David's point, we know at least this much about the Hillary Clinton campaign. They were so curious that they were willing to pony up along with the DNC to pay for a British spy to give a little dirt on the president.
A British spy that was working with Russian sources. So he was getting money from the Clinton campaign, the
millions
DNC,
of dollars.
Millions of dollars to then hire a British foreign spy to work with Russians to grab dirt on the Trump campaign. Seems like an issue to me, but politically, let's take a step back because we've been talking about Russia for a very long time. It is very clear that the Trump administration is trying to discredit Robert Mueller. They have from the beginning. The president has done it himself on Twitter by saying it's a witch hunt, going after Mueller by name. That seems to be working. According to the polling, Americans say that this is a politically tinged investigation. And then last week, we saw that, look, Americans are ready to move on from this, including Democrats. You had the head of the DCCC, I believe it was on Martha McCallum's show, saying, look, you know, we know that this is an ongoing investigation. We're going to wait for the results. But the people that we are talking to on the ground are interested in the economy, what affects them directly at their kitchen table.
You still can't really gauge, whether it's Giuliani or listening to the president himself, whether or not the president's going to ultimately, before this ends, sit down with Mueller. It seems like there's we hear two conflicting stories on that.
There's also another thing that I don't think we should get away from too quickly, which is what role the FBI had in all of this. It wasn't the first time, by the way, that the FBI had spied on a political campaign. It was done in 1964 on behalf of LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson, by J. Edgar Hoover. He spied on the Goldwater campaign. It was all laid out in a brilliant piece in the Wall Street Journal last week. So there have been occasions with the history of the FBI when they went overboard, when they went over the line into political operations.
But they were within legal realms, though.
But we should always be aware that the FBI, as many institutions, spy institutions in the United States, have to be kept in check. That's why the founders were so intent on oversight by Congress, and that's why the DOJ and the FBI not being fully forthcoming with all the information that Congress wants to get is so dangerous. We have to have oversight.
But I do want to make this point, though, because nobody was ever accused of breaking the law. That conversation has come up now because of the political atmosphere with which we live, which everything is seen through that lens. And so if that informant were there for an original purpose, Russia investigation, but had mission creep and became there for political purposes, that's actually not allowed. That's illegal. So, Jessica?
If that happened, and we don't know if we do, we do know that we are in a hyper-politicized, hyper-partisan times. We know that because the president wanted to have an original declassification briefing only with Republicans, and Democrats had to claw their way into that briefing.
He wanted to have it with the party who'd actually asked for the information.
He wanted to have it
Clarify the facts. That's a fact. Well, they requested the information.
Right, but the people who, on both sides of the aisle, who form these committees, people part of the Gang of Eight, have a right to be there. Absolutely. He wants to be in there with his buddy Devin Nunes, and he wants to be in there with partisans and people who have buttressed this theory, the Spygate claim, in order to continue proliferating
Everybody
this
wants
lie
to be partisan,
that this is
it ended up nonpartisan.
But then it ended up because Democrats. Oh yes, it was great. And then Emmett Flood kicked it off with John Kelly. Both partisans work directly for the president there.
Members of Congress, not partisans. I mean, we have Republicans and Democrats and opposing parties that are releasing different memos based on what they feel like they have found. They're also partisans. Everyone in Washington, D.C. is a partisan.
Jessica, do you want to see this come to an end? Do you want to see the investigation come to?
I want Bob Mueller to have as much time as he feels like he needs to do this. I have met very few people who. What if it's 5 years? I don't.
What about the president who says
that this is the investigation saying wrap it up? On the other side, there they were saying as long as this takes. We needed this. People agreed on both sides of the aisle that there had to be a special counsel into this because of the way that Jim Comey was fired, because of the comments that the president was making. Remember him telling Lester Holt, I got rid of Jim Comey. I didn't like the way the Russia thing was going. There is reason to be looking. Obstruction of justice.
I am thirsty for
crimes.
the follow-up from Sandra Smith here.
Well, you just heard Katie say a majority of the American people say it's time to move on. I mean, we're over a year into this and nothing's come up.
Well, that's not true. There are 19 indictments.
I understand that you're concerned about Robert Mueller in this, but what about the president who says he's trying to meet with North Korea? He's trying to move on with the agenda for the United States.
Well, he can walk and chew gum then. I'm really sorry that he spends, all day watching cable news and getting
Democrats
upset.
criticize this president for not being able to focus on North Korea because he's able to do all these other things. But when it comes to the Russia investigation, you want him to walk and chew gum.
Or how about tune it out for a little bit? Spend your Memorial Day just thinking about those who sacrificed their lives and
you're
leave
like
the
I'm a
witch hunt
Christmas
alone.
gift. I have to move on.
A speech.
Did you see the
Call
tweet
for the
about
president to act now on dreamers from within his own party. Why the urgency now? And should the president listen? We'll debate it.
Fox News alert, it could be do or die time on DACA. Cory Gardner, leader of the Senate GOP's campaign arm, delivered an urgent message to President Trump earlier this month, saying Congress and the White House need to act now on immigration reform. The Colorado Republican telling Politico, quote, the sweet spot for getting an immigration deal remains now. The closer we get to the election, and certainly post-election, the more difficult it will be. If we wait longer, the more difficult it becomes. They'll blame it on both parties at that point. Gardner's a part of a small group of bipartisan senators that's been holding back-channel talks in hopes of reviving a deal to protect dreamers. And this comes as House Republicans from both the right and the center drive an effort to force votes on immigration proposals. So do or die time, senators say to the president. What do you think?
I don't think anything is going to pass that makes the president look good in any way, shape, or form. I mean, the November election is all about making the president look as diabolical and evil as possible. That's what they're playing on. That's the game plan. And if there's any deal that could be viewed in any way as positive towards the president, I don't think it's going to get done. So, you can talk about plans on the left or plans on the right. I don't think they're ever going to come together to vote on something.
Do you think the president's getting this message, Katie?
I think that Congress needs to stop the bleeding at the border with the people that are coming in now. The DACA recipients are already here. As far as they're concerned, the judge that ordered the DACA protections to stay, the president cannot now take off, according to this judge. They're actually protected. The issue now is for Congress to get something done on changing asylum laws, to change the standard for Central American families and unaccompanied minors to the same standard for Mexicans and Canadians, even though lots of Canadians aren't trying to come into the country. We have a problem that has to be fixed immediately. And they are focused on DACA, which is not an immediate emergency. If you talk to Border Patrol agents down who are working in the Rio Grande Valley, who are working in Arizona and talking about the thousands of children and the increase, the huge percentage increase that are coming over either alone or with their parents, there is a serious crisis. And then those people are put into the United States and they're never seen or heard from again because they don't show up for their court date. So the real bleeding is at the border. Congress, if they want to get something done, they should start there.
And we are going to talk about that more coming up because we've got some of those pictures. I would say this, though. There are members of Congress who are trying to at least do their part, which is interesting because you've got Representative Diane Black, who started this trust fund where you can put in private money to pay for the wall, making the point of what Katie is saying, do what you can do now. People have agreed upon this. They put this president in office. It's one of his issues. And if he wants to try to press other countries like Mexico to pay for it, he can. But Diane Black told me that, it looks like there's enough interest out there among Americans to put their own fund. She said Americans send money to the government all the time. This allocates it for that one thing.
There are a lot of good plans out there, and there's a lot that has to be done. The INS is
But you can just do it.
I am the stepfather of a 7-year-old boy from Central America who came here with his mom in an overnight bag when he was 7 years old. He later became a U.S. Marine. He became a U.S. citizen while serving in Iraq with the Marine Corps when we were at war. And I said to him, you know, with all the trouble you have with the INS, are you really sure you want to join the Marine Corps? He said, I want to earn my citizenship. And I'm sure there are a lot of DACA people out there, a lot of kids out there who want to earn their citizenship. So eventually, when we get beyond this November election, when Republicans and Democrats can sit down together and figure out how to make, if people are really willing to earn their citizenship, how they can do it.
But if they couldn't
I don't
do
want
it
an
before,
amnesty,
what
but
makes
if they're
them
willing
do
to
it
earn
now?
their citizenship, there should be something
Well,
done.
thank
That's
your
my
son
question.
for his service, because
Yeah.
that's a huge thing and a great story. And we hope there's a lot more stories out there like that.
I think there are, which is what's so great about this cohort of these kids who showed up here. They know no other home than America. They've worked hard. They've gone to school. They have jobs. They want to contribute to the community. This isn't about the larger immigrant population. This is specifically the kids who think of themselves
I don't think
as
all
American.
do. Some do, and those who do, and those who are willing to say, well, we want to do it, there should be some path there.
Even the biggest immigration hardliners, like the Jeff Sessionses of the world, do not say that the DACA recipients, that these kids, now young adults, are ill-intentioned or don't want to do anything but become Americans and contribute to society.
Jessica, you have to be realistic, though, because not everybody wants to do it, but those who do and those who are willing to work hard
find a way
should.
to identify them, because while you are a great proponent as a father, not everybody has an advocate like you to get their story out like that. So it's important to find those people and to nurture that where you exist,
And
to give it some sort of
to straighten out the INS.
That's what the president was talking about doing, by the way. Let's move on just real quickly, but it's all encompassing here with this topic. President Trump is lashing out after an old photograph of immigrant children in a steel cage, which was taken while Barack Obama was still in the White House as president, was linked to the current administration. The president launched a scathing attack on journalists and a former top speechwriter for President Obama, who shared a picture on Twitter in order to blast the Trump administration's crackdown on immigrants, tweeting, Democrats mistakenly tweet 2014 pictures from Obama's term showing children from the border in steel cages. They thought it was recent pictures in order to make us look bad, but backfires. Dems must agree to wall and new border protection for good of country bipartisan bill, exclamation point. This morning, counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway, unable to hide her frustration on the matter. Watch.
Why did a CNN reporter retweet that false fake tweet about the migrant children being in cages? Why did a CNN reporter do that?
But I know you just said on Fox.
Your CNN colleague retweeted that 2 migrant children, I suppose, laying in a cage to make the point against this president. It happened under President Obama's watch, and then deleted the tweet because it didn't fit the narrative. Do you or do you not care about the migrant children?
We should note some of the journalists who posted the erroneous picture deleted their tweets and offered corrections.
Some.
No deletion on Twitter, people. It lives somewhere. We can always find it. So, Jessica, my question for you is, rather than come at this as Democrats with ideas, we're now like in this zone of, pointing fingers and putting up fake pictures. Everybody has to come to the table.
I think they absolutely do, because you're looking at this now that this is a Democrat and Republican problem. This has been going on.
This is an American problem.
Well, exactly, and independent as well. So yes, it's a totally American problem. I don't think that the picture was posted in the first place with ill intentions. I think that obviously anyone who posted it should make a correction and say that it was a mistake. It was a 2014 picture. But we've been talking about this off camera.
You know how Google works, right? You Google and the date comes up.
I Google everything all the time. I know
exactly
you do. How it works.
I'm just saying you should tell them.
I just did. If you posted it, correct it right now.
But
and
your intentions are made clear if you delete it and don't repost it with a correction. Why? Because then it means your intention was, as the president said, to make this president look bad.
There are certainly, because of the things that President Trump has said about immigrant populations, and because of some of these policies that he has implemented and the way that Jeff Sessions is, there is an underlying anger towards him in the way that immigrant populations are treated.
The policies that we see in this photo of children laying on the ground inside of these cells in places like Nogales. I was actually in 2014 one of the first reporters to get a lot of these photos from inside the Nogales detention center, and you talk to the Border Patrol agents, and this wasn't an issue of them just throwing people in cages. This was a situation where they were completely overrun. They're saying we don't have enough food, we don't have enough blankets, we don't have all the resources, and thousands of children without parents in 2014. This was the unaccompanied minor crisis.
Right, remember that, 90,000.
Right, they had no choice but to figure out what to do, and the policies haven't changed, and that is a result of Congress, and they have the ability to do that today.
Yeah, but why pin it on this president when those pictures were taken under Barack Obama as president?
Right.
He had the bully pulpit, we know, because he put DACA in place. He had the bully pulpit because the Democrats scream against the other side that they are heartless and that they're the only ones who hold the policy of heart on this issue.
That's a great point.
Why were those pictures even available in 2014?
Well, another irony is you get comments from Antonio Villaraigosa, for example, the former mayor of L.A., who said this is not who we are as a nation, posting that 2014 picture, presuming that it was for Trump. I mean, the irony of using an Obamism, which is this is not how we are as a nature, as a nation, for something that actually happened during the Obama administration was just incredible. And also, there are certain so-called journalists like Sean King who last week had to pull a story, a fake story supposedly about police brutality that turned out to be false. This week, having to do the same thing with this picture because he tweeted it around the universe yesterday.
I think the
as well.
frustrating thing
And it
is not
causes
giving the
such
broader
damage to the conversation.
Yeah, and it doesn't
really
give the
does.
broader context of why it is the way it is and why the situation is so bad and why the conditions are so bad. And the fact is that open borders are inhumane borders. The reason why you're seeing photos of underage children in cages is because we don't have policies that stop them from coming here. We have policies that enable traffickers of children to bring them here and to abuse them along the way, and nobody is changing it.
But the policies have changed somewhat, and obviously I'm not denying when that picture came from, but we know that Jeff Sessions has announced that there will be more prosecutions
that's not a policy
parents.
change, Jessica. That's simply enforcing the law on the books.
Right, and pushing it past a point that I think many Americans, I venture a majority of Americans,
you got to get
are
through the
comfortable.
300,000 backlog so you can deal with some of these issues and reunite the parents with their kids. We all have a heart
with
about
some
this.
family members, but there have also been over 700 children that have been taken from their parents since October.
Because they can't be put into an adult detention center. And HHS
wouldn't want that with some of the stories that we know of.
HHS is responsible for the child, and they reunify them with someone in the country, a sponsor who is vetted. And by the way, sometimes, a lot of the time, those sponsors are illegal immigrants. And the reason they're saying these children are lost is because when they make the phone call as a follow-up to make sure the kid's okay, illegal immigrants in the country aren't answering the phone because they don't want to talk to ICE.
You bring up a great point, too, which is that if you have a law and it is not enforced properly, particularly if it's on immigration, everybody suffers as a result.
Including the American people.
You need the
anyone
strength
who
of the
looks
law.
at those pictures, whether they're 14, 2018, whenever they are, it's not fair to say that one side is more heartless than the other. This is a problem that we all wear together. Why can't Congress get it together?
They really should.
Let's move on. Boy, did you see this? Violence in Chicago worse this Memorial Day weekend than last year. President Trump weighing in ahead of the shooting, saying Chicago police cannot do their jobs properly because of too much bureaucracy. But the mayor's office refuting that. What it's going to take to keep the city safe, we'll talk about it. Stay close.
There are additional officers in every part of the city. And what I can tell you, too, is this. Some of the officers are a highly visible, overt presence, and some of them you won't recognize as police officers.
A very violent Memorial Day weekend in Chicago. At least 8 people were killed and 30 others wounded in shootings across the city. That's deadlier than the same time period last year when 7 were killed and dozens wounded. Police actually put 1,300 extra officers on patrol to try and keep the streets safer over the holiday weekend. Even before the shooting started, President Trump tweeted, quote, "Chicago police have every right to legally protest against the mayor and administration that just won't let them do their job. The killings are at a record pace, and tough police work, which Chicago will not allow, would bring things back to order fast. The killings must stop." Adam Collins, the communications director for Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel, tweeting back, "As POTUS flails from Asia to the Middle East and puts allies on edge, he still has time to get it wrong on Chicago and police reform. Chicago is a Trump-free zone, not a fact-free zone, and we had a 21% drop in gun violence in 2017 and a 21% drop in 2018. Have a nice weekend." So, David, they can go back and forth about the numbers, but the fact is that dozens of people were wounded and people were killed in Chicago over the weekend, which in the summertime in that city is a normal occurrence.
And we have to remember, just to put it in context, New York has about 3 times as many people. It had 1/4 the number of deaths, violent deaths over the weekend. So, and New York is a perfect example of how you solve the problem. It's not rocket science. Mayor Giuliani did it in the early 90s, and it has carried through till today. In 1992, New York City had 2,200 murders. This year, it's going to have less than 400. No city has ever seen as dramatic a decline in the murder rate, the violent crime rate, as New York City has. And very simple. It's called the broken windows theory. You put it in action. You stop the small crimes. You absolutely have a zero tolerance for any kind of crime. You don't have any tolerance for smaller crimes like jumping the turnstiles if you're in the subway.
Or breaking a window.
Or breaking a window. Once you stop the small crimes, you find out that the big crimes come down as well. That's exactly what we put into place here, and it has continued until today.
Well, there has been a shift on that. I mean, Bill Bratton did not believe in that the way that a Ray Kelly
He didn't believe
in that,
stop and frisk. That's the only thing different.
But that's a really big deal, and that's where the racial profiling aspect of
that
this
was
comes
stop
into
and
play.
frisk.
So let's
that
get
was
back
not
to
broken
Chicago.
windows.
Let's get back to
Guys,
Chicago and what happened.
Shoot a
over the weekend.
question to Sandra,
Sandra,
because
she's
you
from Chicago.
lived in this area. What is it that makes it tolerable for the people who live there? And I use that word because it's gotten worse and worse and worse.
I think what you guys are talking about is reaction, and there's been a lot of changes in that city and a lot of the cities in this country, gentrification of what were formerly very urban areas, and that's changed a lot. It's put a lot of people who living in close quarters that didn't otherwise. You might be familiar with the Cabrini Green area
I used to
of
teach
Chicago.
school there.
There's been a lot of changes over a course of time that has led to this point. Unfortunately, the conversation seems to be about gun control and gun violence when, you know, the mayor of that city to put out such an anti-president, anti-Trump message like that when this city is in the middle of a crisis. This is a moment where everybody needs to come together and figure out a solution for this. And that to me just divides people even more.
Harris, my
Can I
question
just
for you
name
is-
just the obvious thing, though? We had a black president for the first time in this country who
Right,
was
from Chicago.
Chicago. And the situation did not get better.
But it did. It got 21% better.
What 21% better?
And his former chief of
Drops
staff,
in violent crime and murder
now the
rates.
mayor
But
of that
Jessica,
city.
First of all, there's a lot of ways to look at the numbers that they put out, and they put out numbers that make them look favorable and make it look like the situation is
a
improving.
couple years ago.
There has undeniably been a national drop in violent crime and murder rate. That is across all major cities. That is not
We're
something
talking
that
about the
President
city
Trump
of
invented.
Chicago, Jessica.
But that's true in the city of Chicago as well. I don't understand. I read the same numbers that you
over
did.
this holiday weekend were real and they were abysmal. And you've got a city's mayor who used to work for the former president of the United States, who's from Chicago, right? And maybe he's done a lot of things since he left office. I know that there's some organizations that Barack Obama is involved in. But my question for you is, how can that mayor now advocate for sanctuary city for illegals coming into the country, but not keep the actual citizens safe in Chicago? It's just a question. You can be angry at me for it, but anybody can ask it.
All right, well, we got to move on to another topic causing controversy. Starbucks shutting down 8,000 of its U.S.-based locations today to conduct racial bias training. What sort of message this sends to other companies and whether they'll follow suit.
Closing more than 8,000 of its U.S. locations this afternoon so that 175,000 employees can take part in a racial bias education program. This follows protests over the arrest last month of 2 black men who asked to use the restroom without purchasing anything at a Starbucks in Philadelphia. The company says the program is part of a long-term effort to help prevent discrimination and promote inclusion. David, what do you think of this move by Starbucks?
It's a very risky move because I think that the line between loitering and just window shopping at a Starbucks is very thin. And if it encourages loitering, look, when I was a teenager, we used to hang out wherever we could, and we generally shouldn't have been hanging out where we were hanging out at the local drugstore, et cetera, because trouble finds its way into situations like that. That's why they used to have anti-loitering loitering laws. ACLU stepped in and said, no, those are unconstitutional. Maybe they were right, but an individual company has to be very careful not to encourage loitering, which some of these policies
I
seem
always
to be
think
doing.
about the small businesses too, because what if you're running a small coffee shop, Katie, and you've got to keep the lights on, you've got to pay the rent,
right?
You know, you need paying customers in your door, and you need the environment to be comfortable for them as well.
I had the exact same thought. You know, Starbucks can afford to shut down all of their stores for an afternoon and to pay for this training, which they think that all of their employees need. But if you're a small coffee shop, you can't afford to have people coming in and out and using your services for free because someone's paying for it, and that's you. If you look at the example of Seattle, where they've allowed, the government there has allowed people to loiter, to defecate in front of businesses, to create this horrible environment. And guess what? All those businesses are leaving, and the big corporations can afford to leave, but the small mom and pop businesses, they just have to go out.
And gone are the days when you think that, especially with two small kids, right, Harris? How many times do you run in and you think,
Can we use the
okay,
bathroom?
I'll just buy a little something. You know, you buy something because you're going to go use their.
That's exactly right. And I have like tons of those Kind bars that I bought just so we can, you know, and they're in my car and we snack on those all the time because I do think of that small business. And these are franchises, so they're kind of mini small businesses. But, you know, Starbucks has kind of been in this conversation for a while. So I don't know if you guys kept your cups, but remember when they were hashtagging Race Together and they were preaching to the rest of the country about some of the things that were happening and race relations in America. This has been part of their sort of way of dealing with things. The problem is that was about a conversation that was happening in a hashtag moment. This is about Starbucks. So not every Starbucks is going to have these issues. How do they, as a company, taint the entire land of corporations of Starbucks without actually hurting their brand?
I don't know about that, but I think that they are sending out a values-based message that it is important to them as an organization to make sure that every employee has this type of training. And we're not talking about homeless
more than
people who are loitering there. We were talking about two black men who were waiting to have a meeting.
But how do you distinguish that?
In this particular instance, you ask, and you certainly don't forcibly remove someone. You certainly don't get to the point that Philadelphia did. And this also is linked to a larger problem that we have in these cities about homelessness and about how hard it is.
Not homeless.
No, but you brought up people loitering and needing to go to the bathroom, and I myself brought the Kind bars. I buy a bottle of water wherever if I need to use the restroom.
Gotta leave it there.
Okay.
Jessica gets last word again. All right, we're outnumbered in just a minute. We'll be right back.